Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Smiley. And as you know, I am Smiley. I am so happy you came back to visit. Go ahead and grab those plushies, pillows, and find that comfortable seat. We have another amazing story for you. Welcome back, friends. So, for the last few weeks, we have been talking about loving ourselves and how we are one of a kind, how we are special, how we are created, and the world would not be the same without us. We learned how sharing our stories can help someone else to share their stories. We also learned how to appreciate our names, because just like we were specifically designed, so was our names. I want you to think about something. Have you ever had a favorite food that someone else thought was yucky? So you pretended not to like it? Think about it. In our story today, our main character goes through just that thing. Our story for today is A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting more than usual. Today was the first day of school. She couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits. None of them seemed to be quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered in stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "Just look at me." "You get back into bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I have never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, running nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, short of breath, uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," said Dr. Bumble to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should clear up those stripes in a few days. And if it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned to red and white and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" And square patterns of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She could not believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now no one wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans. But she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, let's see. Yes, I see," said Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Group, Dr. Sponge, and Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Group. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Goop. And then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, standing back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh my God, can you imagine that? Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of specialists, he brought experts. Dr. Gourd and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down a lot of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gourd finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced. with authority. Then suddenly, little furry virus balls appeared all over Camilla, or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Melon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gourd. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different fungus blotches. The expert looked at Camilla, then looked at each other. We need to go over these numbers again and back at the lab, Dr. Gourd explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much yet a cure. By now, the TV news found out about Camilla. Reporters from everywhere were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, and an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply. Become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Suddenly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I could help. She went to Camilla's room, looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'd bet you like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plate of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially not me. Oh dear, the old woman said. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait!" she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tail began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla. Everything was back to normal. "I'm cured!" she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterwards, Camilla was not quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never even had a touch of the stripes again. Okay, so Camilla not accepting what she liked or being ashamed of her favorite snack actually carried over into her overall trying to change to fit people's idea of who she should be. Now, how many times have we done that? How many times have we tried to be what someone else wanted us to be? Remember, we're talking about how we are special, how we are unique, how we are one of a kind. And our likes is what makes us special. And so when we start hiding our likes, or when we start hiding our true selves from the world, then not only does it affect us, it affects the world around us. With Camilla, she got so worried about her surroundings, she became her surroundings. And so, my loves, my beautiful, beautiful loves, I want you guys to know and understand that you have to be yourself at all times, because yourself is enough. Yourself is enough. You are beautifully crafted. You are one of a kind. So be yourself. Be bold. Be strong. Be proud to be you. Your weirdness and all, your flaws and all, after all, they are what makes you you. This has been another great story time with Smiley. I am your host, Smiley. Remember, you matter in this world. And if no one else has told you this, I love you. Why? Because you are a one-of-a-kind design, crafted and made specifically for this world, and it would not be the same without you. And I want to see you become everything that you were created to be. Storytime with Smiley is a part of the Uniquely Night podcast. You can follow me on social media at Uniquely Night Podcast, or visit the website at www.uniquelynightpodcast.com. Until then, my loves, my friends, sweet dreams, and I'll see you next week.